Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another Title Tuesday. So I'm excited to have Eric joining me again today. And Eric mentioned this last week with the taxes of like getting into the weeds. This one might be another weeds episode or a weeds edition here because it's a hot topic, and I think it's a thing that a lot of buyers are reaching out for, like my advice on or what's going on this, because I feel like there's been a little bit of a change. So what we're going to talk about today is earnest money. So when it comes to earnest money, putting earnest money down on a contract, everybody does this a little bit differently. So we did talk about earnest money already in one of our other episodes, and we talked about purchase price and money on a contract. Use things like a title company is able to hold the earnest money. You can do things like that. That helps out kind of along the process. What I really want to talk about today is a little bit of earnest money. How much should it be, or how much is it? And then is it really refundable or not, or non-refundable or not? So I feel like a lot of wholesalers right now are kind of putting in their earnest money. Number one has gone up tremendously. So I remember when like $500 was the standard, $1,000 was the standard, that type of thing. Now I'm seeing, $2,500 pretty regularly, or $5,000. And then also another word on there that's non-refundable earnest money. So Eric, what I want to kind of talk about today is can earnest money truly be non-refundable and that type of thing? And yes, that's always the case. And you kind of figure out like, hey, how does the contract work? But where I'm standing from is like, I'm not just going to pay, if I put down $5,000 earnest money, that's to, hey, I'm happy with the property, I'm going to buy it. But if something pops up like where the title doesn't clear or has this huge lien on it and the seller really can't sell it because of this or that type of thing, is I should get back my earnest money. Even it is, even though I find that it might say non-refundable and things like that, what does that really mean? So Eric, as you've seen this transition into earnest money being a little bit higher and words like non-refundable being attached to that and stuff like that, what changes have you guys seen kind of from the title standpoint? How have you guys maybe adjusted to that? Or is it a big of issue? I see it as a big issue because I know people are reaching out to me about it, but are you guys seeing it being an issue on your side?
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, it just like everything else in the housing market, it kind of follows the supply and demand. And so you see higher earnest money requirements during a lower supply. So you've got a high demand right now and the inventory is low. And so there's a lot of wholesalers on the marketplace competing against each other. And so they think that a lot of ways they can grab the interest of that seller is to offer more earnest money, or sometimes the seller just requires more earnest money. To ask if it's ever non-refundable, I guess I would just go back to what you're signing. If you're going to sign a document that says it's non-refundable, you're putting yourself in a pretty bad position. I mean, the letter of the law says when you're writing a purchase agreement for a real estate transaction, and keep in mind, one, I'm not an attorney, but I work for an attorney's office, and two, we're talking about Indiana specifically, but I would know that every state is probably similar. By the letter of the law, earnest money is just that. It is I'm interested in the property. I'm going to go through these steps to make sure that the property fits my criteria, which is pretty standard stuff. Can it be conveyed free and clear of any encumbrances? Is the inspection going to go okay? I'm not going to find out that there's not any water pipes in the house or, something major has happened. But if you're truly signing a purchase agreement that says non-refundable, you're going to find yourself in litigation to try and get that money back. I can't tell you what the judge is going to say, because I would expect them to say, you signed a purchase agreement that says it's non-refundable. I would probably try to avert that if I could and say, listen, I still need an out if I find something major with the property through my inspection, or we find out that, you've got this large encumbrance on the property, or there's an easement or something that I wasn't aware of before title told me. You've got to have a way to get out of that. So non-refundable is an interesting addition that we have seen recently. Yeah. What we see with earnest money disputes more often than not, a title company has 60 days to hold on to that after the expiration of a purchase agreement if we don't get what's called a mutual release. So a mutual release is required for us to give the money back to the person who gave it. If we don't get that mutual release after 60 days, it's actually obligated that we do give it back to the buyer that gave it to us. Okay, so what's important in that respect is that if the seller wants to take someone to court, if the buyer wants to take somebody to court, depending on the earnest money, you're probably going to spend more taking them to court to get it back than you probably spent up front in the first place. Yeah. So I would just be very careful what you allow yourself to sign. I would definitely try to avoid anything that says non-refundable. But yeah, it's just interesting to start seeing that on purchase agreements.
Yeah. And I'd say from the wholesaler standpoint, that's something that I'm going to make sure, just like we've talked about with all these things like closing costs and taxes and things like that, I'm going to make sure that like maybe my contract reads a certain way, or I have that kind of explanation down. For example, of like, hey, if my earnest money is going to be non-refundable and that's where it is like maybe my expectations are that you've already checked out the property, you've already sent your contractor in, you're happy with it, but there could maybe still be something that pops up on the title. So I'm going to include that in there, like, hey, earnest money is non-refundable unless unless the title cannot be cleared or the seller is unable to sell that type of thing. So, because you don't want to build your reputation as a wholesaler, just that person of like, hey, I'm just going to make a living off collecting earnest money. Just have people sign these contracts, things like that. There are people out there doing that, but you're not. That's not the. This business is such about reputation and helping your buyers out as much as your sellers out and things like that. It's not necessarily about collecting that paycheck. That's a part of it, and that's a great part of this business. But when you're able to work with your buyers and be able to, provide them with outs or help them out a little bit, there are going to be buyers that are flaky. And that's the reason that we are seeing a lot of like non-refundable earnest money, because there's buyers that are tying properties up and then walking away from them. Yeah, they should have to give up. They should have to forfeit their earnest money. That's what it is. But make sure if you have people that are working for you, if there's something that is out of their control that pops up, work with them and put those things in there where they still can get out. So something to be careful of, something to think about, and something to reconsider as you're writing up your purchase agreements with your sellers and your buyers. So thanks a lot for this Title Tuesday, and we'll see you guys next week.